Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello and welcome to Magic in the Room. We're recording in downtown Chicago, Illinois. Had some great pizza last night and now super excited to be here. I am Luke Freeman.
I'm Hannah Broderud, and we are recording this episode at the end of 2 days of connection, community, collaboration, in a space where we felt a very strong sense of belonging and, dare I say, love in the room.
I think that's foreshadowing.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay.
That's exactly
I just
what
wanted
it's
to make
called.
it really obvious. So
I'm really excited to introduce our guest, Renée Smith. Welcome to the podcast, Renée.
Thank you. It's so good to be here with you both.
Yeah. And we're going to hear a little bit more of your background and a more thorough introduction in a moment. But Luke, what do our listeners need to know as we get started?
So just setting the table with some context first. Remember, this season 4 of Magic in the Room is all about intentional leadership. So we've talked about how we define intentional leadership. It's notice, choose, and act. We notice that something could be better. We make a conscious choice about how do we make it better in a way that's aligned with our values and our personal purpose. And we actually have the courage to follow through and act on it. And so each month we're diving into what's something that's under the surface. Could be our values, could be our life experiences, our personality that drives how we notice, choose, and act to make this world a better place. And I think today's episode is going to be a great addition to that as we hear from Renée, who is doing that work every day. She's noticed a gap and has made some really conscious choice about how to address it, and every day is working to act. And so quick reminder before we jump in, downloads for reflection guides, how to follow along and learn and grow with us this season are at magicintheroom.com.
All right. Renée, just over the last couple of days, we've been visiting a few times, and just every time we talk and connect, I just get this like, yes, we need to talk some more. And now we get to have this conversation and share it with our community of purpose-led leaders and intentional leaders in our space. So thank you for being here. Give us a little bit of, first of all, what would you say that you do and what led you to this work that you do today?
Yeah. So I would say, in a nutshell, that my purpose, the reason I'm here on this planet is to make the business case for love in the workplace. And I came to that through my work in government, of all places. Surprise.
Yeah.
People are probably like, what?
The most loving institution I could think of. Yeah.
So I was working in Washington state government for a state agency, directing organization development and leading continuous improvement in government, a big push at that time to make things better for Washingtonians, as we said, and which really for me was all about culture work.
Sure.
And in the course of, helping to equip team members and engage folks and drawing people out and helping them to have the skills and the support and the kind of environment that they needed to be able to point out problems and identify opportunities and just make their work better so that we could serve better. In all that culture work, we were making really great progress and doing tremendous things. And I asked our senior leader, the director of our agency, one day, I said, Chris, what do you think is the most important job of a leader? And I will never forget his answer. It was sort of like set me back on my heels, lightning bolt kind of moment. And he replied immediately to eliminate fear from the workplace.
Wow.
And that was just, it was just a profound, beautiful answer. It was music to my ears, as a person engaged in this work, it resonated for me as something that was aligned with my values and that I believed too. Hadn't quite crystallized it with those words, but it certainly was aligned. And it was something that I had seen him try to do in his way, in his style, and that he had encouraged us as his executive team to try to do.
Yeah.
So it all made perfect sense. And it was like only half the story. And so as I, pondered what he'd said and kind of leaned into thinking about fear particularly, it became pretty clear quickly that it was only half the equation, right? So if we were going to decrease fear in the workplace, something was going to take its place, right? And what was that? Like, And in essence, I was asking myself, what is the opposite of fear? And I, talked to people and pondered that and considered what might that be. And, there were lots of notions about that. But at the end of the day, the thing that I got clear on was that if we're decreasing fear in the workplace, the thing that's taking fear's place is love. That essentially fear and love are these two primary human experiences we have. All of the negative that we experience in life can be traced back to fear.
Yeah.
All of the positive is some version, some form of love. And I got super clear on that for myself. And then one day we were in this we held a huge lean conference. So lean and continuous improvement, all that, that world is the world I was moving in at that time. And we held a huge conference in Washington State, 2,000 people in the convention center for 2 days. I was in a breakout session with 400 people in the room. That's how big this conference was.
Wow.
Yeah. And we were presenting on the work that we were doing. And Chris said, it's a leader's job to eliminate fear, and you're going to see these stories and examples of what happens. And I kind of was wrapping us up and said, by the way, when we eliminate fear, the thing that takes fear's place is love. And you could have heard a pin drop in that room, like all the air sucked out of the room. And those 400 people were like, did she really just say that? Right. And so I went on and, kind of cracked the tension with a joke, like, got kind of quiet and then went on to explain, we love our work. We love the people we serve. We care about and love the people we work with.
Yeah.
We want to know that we matter, that we belong, that we count, that we can contribute. And when we have that sense of love, when our work is imbued with that, we can give and do and be our very best.
Yeah.
And there was spontaneous applause in the room that day.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So I had become clear for myself, right, that this is true, but I didn't anticipate spontaneous applause in a room of foreign government workers. And I didn't anticipate getting emails later from people saying, hey, that was really important, keep saying that. And having people stop me in the hallways when I was in state agencies saying, this is important, keep saying that.
Yeah.
So I knew that I was onto something, and it became the thing that I focused on.
So I'm curious, almost from an anthropological, historical perspective, at what point did we lose ownership of the word love in business or in serious, environment?
If you were listening, Luke made air quotes when he said serious.
Yeah, in serious, quote unquote, environments. Because in your story, I heard people reacted as if it was a different 4-letter word, right? Than love.
Exactly.
And for that to be extreme, out of the norm, unexpected, I'd love to hear just your thoughts. Like, how did we get here?
Well, and I think you're touching on something that's so essential that we reclaim, which is we all want this.
Yeah.
We as human beings need to experience love.
Yeah.
And it's my contention that we're not designed to only experience it in this little tiny segment of our lives, that we as human beings, that our work as human beings is to learn to manifest love in all facets of our lives. Different versions, it shows up differently, right? It looks different in different spaces, but that essentially that is our purpose as humans.
Yeah.
And so where did we lose it? I think that's a great question. I think one place where we began to lose it is when work became mechanized, when we started thinking about and adopting machine metaphors for the work that humans are doing. And when humans became cogs in the wheel, or cogs in the machine, and that became the way that we thought about work, and people became interchangeable. And it's hard to know, if we could go back in time in a time machine, right? What work would have felt like when you were in a cottage industry in a village. You're a cobbler or you're doing the work with your family on the farm. I mean, all these different kinds of ways that work looked before it became mechanized.
Yeah.
If that would have felt different and been imbued with a different sense. I don't know.
So that's interesting. That reminds me of several years ago, I was listening to probably NPR at the time. I don't think it was a podcast yet. It was back in my
way back in the day.
Way back in the day. I was listening to this episode, and they had a couple people on, and either they wrote a book or they had an article or something that was titled "Love in the Boardroom." Mm-hmm. And it was similar kind of reaction. I was like, whoa, we can't say that word in a boardroom, in a serious, quote unquote, business setting, right? It would completely invalidate our message, or, however it's interpreted, but it was almost like a taboo, right? To even mention the word love. And this conversation was really pivotal for me and my thinking and approach to performance development and management. The metaphor they used had to do with machines, right? So robots, if we want machine-like outcomes from our people, we want machine-like performance, we want consistency, we want predictable outcomes, we want to be able to turn some screws and get better performance. And so we start treating people like machines in order to get machine-like performance. However, the more we treat people like machines, what happens is we get more human outcomes. We get more, and I mean human then in the, like the sense of human outcomes can be messy, they can be unpredictable, they can be inconsistent, right? And so the more we treat a person like a machine, the more inconsistently they're going to perform. If we flip that script and turn it around and say, we're going to treat humans like humans, and we're going to learn how human beings, what human beings need to be at their best, and we treat humans with humans, which is really about treating them with love, with care, with empathy, provide a sense of belonging, all of those things, we actually get more machine-like outcomes because we get those more consistent and even more predictable performance outcomes, because when needs are met, human beings perform at their best.
Right. It's such a fascinating dichotomy and flip, and I never would have thought of it that way quite, but I understand what you're saying, and I think it's true. I mean, it aligns with, we heard a presentation on neuroscience that, on brain science this morning, and on the stress response, right? And so when you put human beings in stressful condition, there's certain things that happen, chemicals released, and that suppress our heart, or that make our heart race and our palms sweat and our pupils dilate and our muscles get twitchy, and we go into fight, flight, freeze, appease, and in that condition, we don't use our prefrontal cortex. We're not calm and relaxed and thinking creatively. We're not connecting. We're not doing all of the things that we need to do in order to engage in the ways that we hope and want to encourage people to do in the workplace, to solve problems, deliver service, collaborate, think critically. All the important work that we have is not going to happen at its best when we're in that threatened condition.
Yeah, we go into survival mode, and we draw on our survival strategies, which are sometimes helpful and sometimes unhelpful. And, gaining awareness of that, I think, is helpful, right? It's another thing we can notice about ourselves, about others, and we can choose what kind of environment we're going to create. And you worked in government, which on a recent episode, we had Danny Langloss on the podcast, who, spent a decade as chief of police, and now he's doing city manager. He's a city manager and works in government work. And I heard him say during one of our conversations over the past couple days that, government is the most feared institution. Government is something that just naturally brings up fear for a lot of people and for different reasons. And so I think just the irony of this work of love being born inside, an institution that often is based on fear. And there are certainly leaders still today that believe in fear-based leadership and that intentionally lead with fear because they've seen results from that, right? There's something that has reinforced that I got to just yell some more. I got to be mean to people. I'm going to hold people accountable, quote unquote, but that's often used in a very negative kind of way, calling people out, embarrassing them, shaming them, whatever it is, that you do to try to create some performance outcomes. And you can get some outcomes with fear-based leadership.
Right. For
a bit, right? And so I'd love to hear, I know you were trained as a social scientist. You also have this, you alluded to Lean Six Sigma. You have a black belt in Lean Six Sigma, which is all about process improvement and increasing performance. I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on that. Like, why not fear? Why not fear-based leadership?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I mean, part of the reason I think that leaders go to that often is that so much of our early lives and examples are fear-based leadership and controlling, dominating kinds of styles of leadership. And, whether it's, through parenting or school or coaching sometimes, or, up through the, those early years of life, we don't have a lot of examples of a more kind of compassionate style. Not always. I mean, there's a variety of things that people can experience there, and some of it is not always very good. When I grappled with this question, the thing that I wanted to tap into and really to learn from to answer this question was what are the experiences that people have had, and how can I learn from those experiences? And so really to answer this, I created a research project for myself and devised a way to interview people and gather data, qualitative data, to understand from people's stories what really actually happens when people experience fear at work and then also love at work.
In your research, what happens when people are driven by fear, and why? Why does that happen? And on the other hand, what happens when we're led by love, and how can we create, what are the outcomes in each scenario, and how can we be intentional about what we choose in that regard?
Yeah. So the way I approach that is I would ask people, and I'd even invite you. I mean, you can think we can go to this place if you're game, and I just invite people who are listening to even think for themselves about how they would answer this question. Yeah. So think of a time when you felt afraid at work, and just what happened. What did you do? What did others do? What were the impacts of that experience on you, perhaps on your team, on the work you were trying to do, maybe on your customer, on your personal life, on your physical body and well-being, on your mental well-being, and then what that experience meant to you. And what's true is that everyone has a story. Yeah. Many people have many stories. Yeah. And so I asked that question and gathered stories, right? And so there are types of stories that people told. So I can tell you the types of stories, and then if you want to, share what comes to mind, maybe tapping into which ones resonate. I have very
salient examples, so I'd love to hear the types of stories and see where mine fits in.
Yeah, totally. So some people, when I ask this question, will say, I was afraid during a performance challenge. I was afraid I wouldn't succeed when in a performance challenge. And they would describe, they needed to give a talk or start a new job or take on a new set of tasks or take some kind of an exam or test or some certification or something, and being really afraid that they weren't going to be able to meet the moment, and then moving through that experience and having the fear subside. And what was clear is that as long as the performance challenge wasn't being set up to fail, that this actually wasn't a bad kind of fear. This was a segment of stories that people would tell that actually represented a kind of a good, healthy kind of fear. And sometimes people would say, well, isn't there good kinds of fear? Well, yeah, this is a good kind of fear, actually, because this is the kind where we get challenged, we meet the moment, we stress and go through the thing, and we pass through and we learn and grow and maybe attain something.
So you could call it a type of stress that's positive stress?
I would, yeah.
But there's some fear involved because you don't know what the outcome is going to be.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so I'm acknowledging that is a kind of story that people tell, but kind of setting that aside as not a toxic kind of fear.
Yeah.
The others represent toxic kinds of fears. So the next kind of fear story that people would tell is I was abandoned after a change. So everything was going along great. I got good performance reviews. The team was, gelled well. Everything was great. Got along well with my leader, and then something changed. Yeah. Sometimes the team composition changed. Sometimes the work changed. Oftentimes it was the leader that changed, and experienced leader left, got a promotion, retired, moved on, whatever, and a new, less experienced leader took their place, or a leader that maybe had experience but for whatever reason didn't bring clarity about their expectations and left people floundering and not sure about how to be successful any longer.
Right.
And people described just the amount of stress that creates and the amount of fear that they're not going to get it right, being marginalized, being left out, and eventually leaving the job. Consistently, people would leave those jobs and go to work somewhere else. People describe being betrayed, either betrayed by an interpersonal relationship in the workplace that went sour, or another kind of betrayal was when a leader would betray their integrity. And it was incredibly distressing to people. One of the quotes that was just so gripping, someone said, I was like a hobbit trying to stay out of the eye of Mordor. Yeah. Trying to avoid the leader and just not be tangled up in the lack of ethics or the whatever was going on that they just couldn't stomach. Right. Another kind of fear story was being shamed and publicly humiliated. So people describe being called out in meetings and yelled at and belittled and picked apart and shot down. And what was clear is that these kinds of fear experiences were incredibly damaging, that people remembered them for a really long time, that they remembered them deep in their gut and their soul, and oftentimes even in the telling of a story that had happened years before would become emotional and cry in the telling of the story. Often needed therapy, sometimes for years, because of the trauma that happened in those fear circumstances and in those workplace relationships. People described being isolated when they faced a personal crisis and being told, I want you to leave home at home and work and just do your job. I don't want to know about whatever's going on in your personal life, even if there's a death in the family, even if you're going through a divorce, even if there's sickness or, some kind of, even if you've got, family member who's, on opioids and you're dealing, there's all the things that people have going on. And when people are told, put on a mask, don't tell us about it, just come in and do your job, it's like a deep betrayal of our humanity. And the idea that, oh my God, this thing is happening and I have to hold it, and I'm processing it, and I don't want it to bleed into my work, but I also, I don't want to dump it all over, but I do want somebody to know what's going on, right? That created so much distress for people.
Or sometimes the fear can be, I don't want anyone to know what's going on because I don't trust that what's going on is going to be cared for. And so I'm going to do everything I can to not show anyone, not share anything, act like everything is normal because I don't trust that this environment is going to protect me, help me feel safe, that it's going to be okay.
Right.
I might get fired, I might get demoted, there may be some performance, somebody's going to judge me because this thing is happening at home, or I have this problem or this challenge that I can't figure out how to get out of.
Right. You're describing the essence of that beautifully. Exactly. And so that takes its toll on people. And then the final fear story that I would often hear is I experienced harassment and discrimination in all of the forms that we're probably, as a society, more aware now, than others, between the Me Too movement and with the George Floyd's murder and other atrocities that have happened. It's just, we're aware more than ever. And, many people in your audience have been aware all along.
Right.
Right. And the stories that I heard, some of them just were heartbreaking. The man that said, I never felt accepted, the black man who said, I never felt accepted, only tolerated for his entire 35-year career.
Wow.
It's just heartbreaking and tragic and heartbreaking and tragic that human being experienced that.
Yes.
And tragic because of what was lost in what he wasn't able to fully bring.
Right.
What could have been.
What could have been, exactly. And how many what could have beens, ripple across society, all, constantly. So are everywhere all the time. So there are many stories related to that. So those are the flavors of fear stories that I heard.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what resonated for you or where your stories might connect.
Yeah. The one that resonated for me was the publicly called out, the humiliation one. I remember a project that I worked on, and I felt like I had authority to work on it. There was a program I was responsible for, and we needed a facility for it. And so I went as far as, well, what's the footprint need to look like? And designing, here's some ideas. And I'm a pretty hold things loosely, person where I love feedback and I love collaboration, like just in my bones. Love to collaborate and brainstorm. But I eventually got to a point where I thought, okay, like it's brainstorming time, it's collaboration time. I've done enough groundwork that I can pull together all these stakeholders, and I pulled everyone into a meeting room and probably scheduled it a week or two out and did this presentation and said, here's an idea, right? We know we have a need. Here's one way that we could meet it. And I'm just curious for everyone's feedback. And spent probably hour and a half presenting and facilitating conversation and taking notes. And as it all ended, we were walking out of the room, and this was at a nonprofit, and the executive director kind of pulled me aside and said, what were you thinking ever having this meeting without showing all of this to me first? And I was just, felt like a fool. I was angry, of course. But we were talking about ripple effects earlier. I mean, the ripple effects of that conversation were huge because my interest in being aggressive for my program and stepping out and pushing for my vision really was diminished. And, eventually it came back, right? I am who I am, and I can't help but being a little bit action-oriented and a driver. But I would say the organization lost out big time. And I tried very hard to constrain myself to what was expected. And, for me, it worked out great because I was like, well, what am I going to do? If I'm not going to press forward here, okay, I'll go to grad school. And so I unplugged and did what was expected of me and challenged myself in other ways and grew and developed. But yeah, it was a challenging time for sure. So...
what strikes me about your story, and I don't think I've ever heard this crystallized this way, not so much about fear, but just this idea that what's expected isn't what's possible.
Right.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And what a loss to not be open, especially in a nonprofit,
Right.
to be open to what might be possible that we never would have expected.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you ended up going to grad school.
I did. And, I
yeah,
stayed at that organization for quite a while after that, but I would say a lot of my experience was characterized by trying to figure out what's the expectation, because pushing past the expectation is painful whenever it's scary to people, or they're not ready for it, or they don't understand it. And part of that is, I was not a very skilled communicator, and I should have managed stakeholders better, but I think there's probably a better way to coach that in a young leader.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. To see that potential and draw it out in a positive way instead of shame and, try to pigeonhole you.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, if I could ask this, what did having that experience mean to you?
What did it mean to me? I think what it meant to me, I think it was the beginning of the divergence between my values and my identity and the values of the organization. And there's some healthy things about that, but there are also, from the organization's perspective, there is a loss there. Right? The more light that there is between my values and the organizational values, probably the less discretionary effort I'm going to give to the organization.
Right. So it was clarifying for you, but again, it was a loss for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. How about you, Hannah?
Yeah, so my story of fear began when I was working in corporate America, in large enterprise setting. I'd been building and developing this program for a long time. That was really my baby. It was a training program that was kind of a new thing in the organization. We hired recent college graduates in from all over the country, and they stayed with us for 3 months, and we created this very experiential learning experience. And I was very intentional about creating connection and meaning and things like that, right? And the program grew and grew, and it got more and more attention, and it grew beyond the capacity of me being all the trainees for the time they were in training also reported directly to me. And so I found myself in the position of having 24 direct reports who were all many first-time employees, first time working inside a large organization. And there was a time when I got called in to HR, and I was told that there was an HR investigation on me. And these different questions got asked so this weekend there was some things that happened, and supposedly I was involved in a lot of different things that I had been on a hike, and there, as far as I knew, nothing had happened, but I'm hearing the story that I don't recognize at all. And I'm experiencing accusation, and what turns out to have happened, there's an individual that reported to me who was part of this program. And I was kind of newer as a leader, and I hadn't known how to navigate it. But I had started noticing that she was lying about things to get attention, to achieve certain outcomes. I had kind of met with her privately to try to help her and coach her. I hadn't reported this to HR because I felt like I needed to just build the relationship and help her. And in that case, it turned around, and she had made lies and accusations about me and my conduct, and was of an ethical nature that was it was embarrassing to me to even think about that someone would be talking about me in this context. And I felt, and I was trying to figure out which category this fell in, because there was there was somewhat of a public, because they went and interviewed all my reports to learn about me. And, fortunately, like, I think they got enough evidence that, that I'm not that kind of person. But just going through that, like, I'm like feeling shame right now, even just thinking about it, even though I did nothing wrong. But the fact that someone said these things about me, right? And so there was that. And then there was the whole experience of betrayal of not just from the individual that lied, but the whole HR organization and my leadership, where, their first primary goal was to protect the employee. And I was an employee too, but I was in a leadership role. And because I was the leader, even though I had been there for many years and thought I had the trust, all of a sudden I felt like there was suspicion, that my reputation was at stake. And it just like had these ripple effects, both on my performance. I already had an inkling that I was going to be leaving soon. And this experience just kind of solidified that, because I no longer felt like I had support from the organization in what I was doing. And, it was a false incident, but the way it was treated and the way I experienced that, of like, now from having high trust to having very low trust, it completely changed the rest of my experience in that organization.
Yeah. Wow. I'm sorry you had that experience. I can tell that it was really, really.
I got a little emotional about it, even now, years and years later, thinking about it.
Yeah. Thanks for taking the being vulnerable to share that, because I'm certain that there are, people listening who are going, oh yeah, me too. And on the one hand, it's hard to remember these stories.
Yeah.
And it can be a little traumatic. Hopefully, sometimes it's cathartic, actually, to sort of get it out. I have, done interviews with people, and they come back later and say, yeah, I don't even remember the story that I told you anymore. Yeah. So there can be that effect, and it can stir some things up. So take good care of yourself after this. That's a thing. And I think the thing that I want to ground this in, the sharing of the themes that from the research, and then your examples, and those that people listening are, remembering, thinking about too, is that what we need to be clear about is that these experiences are damaging.
Yeah.
They do not get us what we want in organizations. Right. That this way of leading, this way of teaming that tries to scare people into good behavior or threaten people, or, all the different forms that kind of bullying, fear-based, heavy-handed, dominating kinds of leadership can take, that doesn't get us what we're looking for. And not only does it not get us good results, but it actually slows things down, causes people to withdraw, creates damage. Yeah. It is debilitating and harmful to what we're trying to do. And in an environment, and many people are leading things today that we really need them to solve the problems that they're working on. Yeah. People who are working in energy and in health sciences, and in different parts of government. We could name lots of different sectors. Yeah. Housing. There's all kinds of things that we are suffering as a society, and we need those problems solved. And we need to not be scaring the people who are trying to solve those problems into, as you were saying, Luke, withdrawing, pulling back, or as you were saying, Hannah, just leaving, right? Yeah. So part of what I want to advocate for is, it's not just, wouldn't love be nice, because it's just going to make it a nicer kind of work experience. Sure. Yes, but love is essential because it's going to foster the kind of ways of working together and the kind of way of being as an employee that actually is able to create solutions. Yeah.
Right.
And we need those solutions. Right. So that's my advocacy, that we cannot tolerate fearful environments anymore. We need them to be loving, to create the society and solve the problems that we have.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting paradox there that my guess is there are many leaders, especially executive leaders, that when they think about accountability for supervisors, managers, directors, they probably think the loving thing is to stay hands off, let that person lead in the way that's their style, right? Don't disrupt the organization. Think about how hard it's going to be if this leader leaves who brings in all of this revenue or who is responsible for this project. But in reality, there is this, chicken egg thing where, providing accountability to lead in a loving way, while it might mean some hard conversations in the short term,
Right.
is actually leads to more love. I don't know. I'm saying that as a question.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your take on that? How do you see
Yeah.
people enact a culture of love? And maybe we should define love first.
Yeah. Well, how would you define love?
Oh, I was going to ask the expert.
I have some thoughts on it.
Yeah.
So I've read a lot about attachment theory, what caused
Yes.
people to create connection and attachments to each other. And the best definition I've heard of love is emotional attachment.
Yes. 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 I would build on that to say emotional attachment that creates this sense of positive regard and care and commitment to each other.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Essentially.
Because I guess emotional attachment could also be conceivably a negative
Go
emotional
into a
attachment.
dark shadow side of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, when we talk with people, and I ask this, all kinds of qualities come up when I interview people. And I ask them, tell me your love story.
Yeah.
Some people will say, well, tell me the story of the time when you felt loved at work. And some people will say, well, I felt loved at work when this happened. And they'll
Right.
use that L word and go right into it. Most other people, though, will say, I wouldn't have thought of it this way. I wouldn't have thought of it as love. But now that you mentioned it, there was this time when I experienced deep respect or trust or kindness.
Right.
Or compassion or empathy or belonging and inclusion
Right.
or courage
Yeah.
or challenge. And they bring these different qualities forward that are all manifestations of love in the workplace. And really they're giving the operational definition of love at work when
Right.
they, in
Yeah.
that case. Another way that I like to think about it is that when I say the word love, it's natural for each of us to sort of immediately think about our closest people.
Sure.
Our friends, our family, children, if we have them, parents, whatever, all of our relatives and so on, are those that we hold most dear.
Yeah.
And on the other end of the spectrum, we could be, walking down Michigan Avenue here and in Chicago and having someone pass us on the sidewalk who trips and falls and spills all their stuff all over the sidewalk. And we pause and we help them up and gather their things and put them back together in their purse and their bag and make sure they're not hurt and then send them on their way. And we go on their way and we never see that person again. But in that 30-second interaction, there was love.
Yeah.
There was human care and love.
Yeah.
And so what I would offer is that if we have love in that moment, that with someone whom we never see again, and then on the other end of the spectrum are our people who were with, for a long time, there are also different phases and sectors of, if you will, of our lives where love also belongs.
Yeah.
And where we are meant to find and manifest love. And, it's pretty popular to say, love isn't a feeling.
Right.
Love is it's something that you do.
Love is a verb.
Exactly. What I would offer is it is a noun and a verb.
Yeah.
It is a feeling.
Yeah.
It is a feeling that we all need.
Sure.
And it is something that we all need to do as well and experience, right? So it's both. If we're going to be whole, full people, we don't want to dismiss either in any manifestation of it. We need to feel it and we need to do it.
Yeah.
So in all of those forms. So again, if, manifesting love with our closest people, with a stranger, with the people that we spend the most time with, right? Those whom we work with.
Yeah.
So yes, love there. So when I ask people about their experiences of, times when they felt loved at work, and they gave me all these flavors and varieties, they mostly talked about what I would call moments that matter. Okay. And I think as leaders, there's a dichotomy in there. So the research that I did surfaced ways that leaders and teams can be there and provide love for each other in these moments that matter.
Yeah.
And there's a complement to that has really become clear over time, which is you can meet your team members as a leader in moments that matter, but if the system, if the structures, if the policies, if the formal structures of an organization are themselves not imbued with love,
Right.
then it's not complete.
Yeah.
And so thinking about intentional leadership needs to develop the ways of being as a leader that meet people in those moments that matter with human love and care, and gives attention to systems and structures to ensure that those are loving too.
Right.
And that's a complete whole, right? So if you have one without the other on either side, it's incomplete and will be inauthentic and experienced badly, essentially, it will not be a good experience for those who are in your workplace.
Yeah.
So when I ask people about their love stories, some will say, my love story is that my leader loved me. My leader loved me as a person. They cared about me. They got to know me as an individual. I was trusted. I was given challenge assignments. They invested in my learning, those kinds of things. They really saw me and knew me for who I was, and helped me, to be my best.
Right.
So that primary relationship with that leader was essential.
Yeah.
The second love story was my team was like a healthy, loving family. Now, people use this language of the family about their team a lot.
Yeah.
And it's a problem, So I want to talk about that a little bit.
I can already see the comments.
Yeah, it is.
See the emails. Yeah.
So what's become clear to me, first of all, is that we talk in metaphors, and when people say that, they're grasping for something. They're trying to communicate certain qualities. And I think what they're really trying to say is, I belong and I'm accepted by this group.
Yeah.
Because that's our idealization of a family, that,
Right.
if my family is where I should belong and be accepted. And so when they're invoking family, they're invoking that sense of belonging and acceptance.
Yeah.
But that language is problematic. Some people don't want team and family comparisons made. My team's my team, my family's my family, don't mix them up. For other people, they don't come from healthy, loving families. And so invoking family is only invoking trauma.
Yeah.
And then there's also the real shadow side of this, which, there's too many examples out there to count of, we invoke family like, hey, we're in the family. I've got your back. I've got you covered. You can do whatever, and I'm gonna make sure that it doesn't. There's no repercussions. So bad behavior, poor performance, illegalities, harassment, whatever. It's okay.
Yeah.
You're in the family,
And you're in the family, so it also creates a problem with performance management sometimes, right? Because
exactly.
Are you going to fire your family? Are you going to
Exactly.
hold your family member accountable?
Right. Yeah. And so not that, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Now, and I know that we're on a bit of a family tangent here, but I will say too, I don't use the word family to describe, the team that I feel most connected to. But I will say that there are people that they might go home and be alone every night. And when they share on social media, or when they make a comment to someone like, oh, I love my work family. Right. We need to give them a break. Yes. Right. If that is a helpful metaphor for them, like, let them have it. Yeah. So there just seems to be a lot of vitriol about people using the F word. And I just if it's helpful for folks, let them use it. Now, if it's a leader that's using it manipulatively, right, obviously not appropriate.
Right. Yeah. I'd so appreciate that distinction. So I don't feel appropriate advocating for it, but I totally like have met lots of employees who say, no, this is our thing. This
Yeah.
is how we are together. And it's like,
Same.
more power
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
awesome.
And often people who do come from a family experience where it wasn't loving or connected, or, you know, there maybe was a sense of betrayal or trauma.
Right.
You know, we get to choose. There's our family that we choose, you know. I hear
Right.
people talk about that too, right? My
Right.
friends are my family, or my work team is my family,
Right.
and that's the family I chose, not the family I was born to. But
Yeah, exactly. I have lots of friends in the LGBTQ community who will
Yeah.
say, chosen family is a thing. And,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
is a powerful way to look at that.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
The third love story that I often hear from people is, I was supported in a personal crisis. So sort of the opposite of the fear story.
Yeah.
And there are all kinds of versions of that story that I have heard and have experienced
Yeah.
that are really profound. And I guess that's part of what really motivates me is, you know, we can hear stats, right? We can hear data, numerical data, and you know, research that sort of is at a distance. But sitting down again and again, I've done 75, you know, one-on-one interviews, and then hundreds of people in workshops. And looking people in the eye and hearing their stories is so compelling.
Yeah.
And there's also sort of a delight and an amazement at all the different beautiful ways that we can meet people
Yeah.
and care for people and have profound impacts on people's lives, especially as leaders, but as team members too. When people are in these moments that come to us all.
Yeah.
This story is a little difficult, but I think kind of illustrates the uniqueness that can be there. So I interviewed a gentleman who he told me his fear story, and then he was telling me his love story, and he started out by saying, my brother tried to commit suicide last Friday, and he paused and he said, and this was on a Monday that I'm talking to him, and he said, and he succeeded. He was there with me in this interview, and I'm holding space for him and being with him in that moment. And he went on to say, when I showed up for work this morning, my leader and my key team member were aware, but they knew that I'm a really private person and that I wouldn't want a lot of fuss made and I wouldn't want to talk about things. And so they put these little objects, some little figures, on my computer stand. And they were things that they knew that he would like, that were meaningful to him because they'd taken the time to know him as a human. And so they knew what his preference would be in that moment.
Yeah.
And they knew enough about him to know what might bring him comfort and joy. And they placed those things there, and that was love for him in that moment.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
Another version of that, we have a team member on our team. I'm going to bring this on home for our team now. We have a team member whose wife was diagnosed with cancer a little like maybe a year and a half ago. And last August, she suddenly took a turn, and we knew that she was going to pass. And, you know, we're virtual, and completely virtual as a team. And we're on this morning meeting, and he's sharing this news with us, and we're there to support and comfort him. And it suddenly just hit me, she's in the other room. And we haven't met her before.
Yeah.
You know, but she's right there. And in that moment, two things. I offered to him, I said, you know, Rick, if Rebecca would like, we would love to meet her. And if she's able, we would really love to meet her. And it turned out that she wasn't able to. But I also said, if she can't, that's all right. But here's what I want her to know. I want her to know that we've got you. And if I can't tell her that directly, will you tell her that we will love you after she's gone? And he was able to tell her that. And we have been able to love him
Yeah.
in all these months since.
Yeah.
And that, like, you know, we do work, right? Yeah. We're trying to bring certain products and services into the world, all that. Yes.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, this is what matters. Like, and doing this well with each other, humaning well with each other
Yeah.
is ultimately what makes anything else that we do impactful and real and meaningful and just better. And so what an honor as a leader to be able to be there that way and to ripple love into people's families and communities.
Yeah.
Like, that's the opportunity for intentional leadership that we have.
Yeah.
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 So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Very meaningful story. Thank you for leading that way. Edwin Friedman was a family systems therapist who also applied family systems to organizations that he consulted with. And he's got this quote that I just love that says, you know, in the hundreds of organizations that he worked with, he never found a one that the emotional health of the organization surpassed that of its most senior leader. And I'm just reminded of that as you share this story, that those of us who are tasked with leadership, there is an influence there on the organization that's directly correlated with our level of emotional maturity. And so one, I just want to say, I think this story reflects on you as a leader, right? Which I don't think you would say, but I'll say it. And I think for listeners, you know, to be able to hear that someone was able to, in the moment, have such a direct effect on their team, it's because of the emotional maturity that Renee has. And I think for all of us, I know for me listening to the story, I'm just like, oh gosh, would I do that? Can I do that? What parts of me are afraid to do that? And how do I mature in such a way that I can provide that experience of love to my team, to our clients, to the people that we're connected with and have influence on. So I do think there's a direct call, a direct challenge for leaders to wrangle with this a little bit, because I also hear people thinking like, oh, I don't know, this is a little uncomfortable. I don't think I could do that on a video call. And like, that emotion is real, and we should acknowledge it. And also, I want people to know, like, you can, like, we can have that impact. And the only, like, if our assumptions about what work is are the thing holding us back from it, we should question those assumptions.
Yeah, that's so well put. And thank you for that.
Yeah.
I think it is the beautiful opportunity that we have as leaders. It's the challenge, certainly, and like the high calling. And it is the beautiful opportunity, the motivation. If we can't be motivated necessarily for ourselves always, but if we are motivated by the opportunity to like do something more and different and more profound with this role than just produce a thing, you know,
Right.
make a living, whatever. Not that those don't have their own kind of dignity, because they do.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be an either or. It can be an and.
Yes.
And we have this opportunity to cultivate our internal life and experience such that we can rise to these occasions in the way that's authentic for us.
Right.
So that was authentic for me, and we'd cultivated, you know, over time with our team, our way of being to do that. And every person has their way. And so that might have looked like a private conversation with, you know, for someone else.
Right.
Yeah.
Every person has to come to their version, you know.
Right.
But I would encourage, don't hesitate to dig in and do the work that enables you to build the muscles, the emotional muscles, to meet those moments. Because again, those moments that matter are the differentiators for us as leaders and for our teams.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they hold worlds of possibility. And I think I rarely have met a leader that really doesn't want to make some kind of difference beyond just the kind of direct work itself.
Right.
This is part of that opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, Renee, this has been really a wonderful conversation. Really appreciate you sharing of yourself and your work with us and with our listeners. Luke, any final thoughts, key takeaways as you process this conversation?
Oh, wow. I mean, I think we could do a whole nother episode. I mean, you kind of got to one of your aha moments and then all of this stuff afterwards. So I know that Anna's going to ask too, like about your work today and how people find you. But I'm just so grateful for you spending time with us. My takeaway, it really is what I just said. I want to continue to lean into growing and developing. And I think all of us are tempted to think I've made it, right? I've leveled up. I've worked really hard. Don't I deserve to plateau for a while? But for me, I want to have the most impact possible. And that doesn't always mean, I think, comforting someone who's dying. I think it also means, am I mature enough to notice opportunities for just unadulterated joy? And can I influence that? I think that's another form of love. And all of these pieces of this, all the facets of love, right? How do I grow towards that? How do I grow not afraid to say love, right? In all the contexts that I'm in. So that's mine. Really appreciate the challenge and being able to think about it.
I love that you brought the joy forward because, the two examples that I shared were pretty heavy, right? But there's the whole human, spectrum of human experience that we should tap into.
Yeah. So. And I think that's my big takeaway is create the space for the human experience in work, right? And I think when we treat humans as resources, which is, we are pretty open about where we believe HR went wrong, and we create, I love your team and your website, and we'll hear some of the places to contact you, but making work more human in the best possible ways, by creating sense for belonging and psychological safety and trust and care. And that is what's going to create higher trust environments. So really appreciate you, Renee. If people want to connect with you, learn more about your work, how can they find you?
Yeah. So our organization is A Human Workplace, and you can find us at ahumanworkplace.com or makeworkmorehuman.com. And then I also speak on this. I feel like sort of my assignment on this planet is to make the business case for love, and I do that in a lot of different ways, but as through speaking at reneesmithspeaks.com. So happy to connect, and on LinkedIn too. All the places.
I feel like we'd be missing an opportunity not to just call out the beauty of that personal purpose. So we talk about our personal purpose a lot on this podcast, but to make the business case for love, like that's a very crystal clear, obviously lots of thought and dedication to go into that. So just want listeners to notice, like, hey, when you get clear about your purpose, good things happen, right?
Yes.
So thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
Yeah. Right. I want to remind our listeners that if you want to follow along with this conversation and the weekly conversations on Magic in the Room, we've created a reflection guide that you can download. It's a free resource that you can find on magicintheroom.com. All right. So I'll sing us out. Magic in the Room is hosted by Chris Province, Hannah Broderud, and Luke Freeman. It is produced by Ben West. Social media support is by Emma Holland and Michael Manfredi. Our theme music is by Evan Grimm. You can find his music on Apple Music. This episode was recorded on site in downtown Chicago during the No Longer Virtual Conference. Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group. Find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com, and you can find previous episodes at magicintheroom.com.